Alright folks, next up on my list for my DM's Guild review video is Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 1. This module on the DM's Guild is an interesting amalgamation of a bunch of different things. From character concepts to new monsters, magic items, and even interesting tips and tricks for both dungeon masters and players alike. If you want to know a little bit more about it, stay tuned. Alright, so here we are on the DM's Guild. You can see that this is a $10 module, so as I say in all of these videos, if it's going to be a paid module, I'm not going to go through everything. One, this is an 88-page document, so it's going to be a long time to go through it from start to finish. But two, I don't want to discourage you from picking up a copy for yourself. I will also say up front, this was provided to me as a review copy for review purposes, but that will not sway my my review either way. So you can see it's got 5 stars for 19 ratings. You've got some comments from MT Black here. It's a best silver seller. Clearly a well thought out document. This was released in November, excuse me, of last year. But you can see what you'll get here, right? Character concept, monster variants, encounter ideas, magic items, DM tips, and player tips. So what I'm going to do is for most of these, I'm going to give you basically one. And then for some of the player tips, I want to stress a couple because they're things I encounter every time I play the game in my own experience, and I think players should be aware if they're not. So it's an interesting document because basically the whole front half of it, actually I'd say probably the first 75% of it is all for dungeon masters, and then after that, the last little bit's for players. So here we go, some cool art. Role-playing tips and tricks. So you can see here again, character concepts. There's a ton of stuff here. So let's go ahead and look at our character concepts. And I'm going to use, so this is basically a bunch of character concepts you can either have as NPCs or as character concepts. So the one we're going to look at today is the episode 6 here. Now these, again, it says episodes. I don't know if it's specifically written in an episodic fashion. These are just different character concepts. I guess you could use these in different, maybe these were brought up on the Crit Academy podcast, but either way, there's the breaker of the fourth wall. And essentially what this is a person who's on their way to a Dungeons and Dragons game, and very similar to like the D&D cartoon, if you will. There was an explosion, and you're basically transported into the world of Dungeons and Dragons. So magic, dragons, all of that is real, but you also know that the game is fictional. So you don't know how to get home. And it also states here, no running water is going to get annoying real quick. So that's just an interesting concept for a character. I don't think it's going to fit in everybody's game. But it could be an interesting thing if you have a more fun kind of role play loose. Like you're not super focused on the story. A character that was literally from our world that was transported there could be pretty interesting. And then they also have a little bit here about what's a good concept for the character. And one thing I really like is like maybe your cleric doesn't gain power from a divine god, but they gain a bit from devotion to the game they've been transported into. So you're actually get your magic from Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought that could be an interesting concept for Clark. So let's just jump ahead a little bit here. I don't have it pre-picked, so we get some monster variants here. You can see a couple here as we scroll through. And the one that I'm going to go with is Kamikaze Kobold. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. CR2, it's a kobold, right? It has all the kobold typical things, but it has this dead man switch ability. When a kobold hits 0 hit points, the powder keg action happens as a reaction if it hasn't been already used, which is each creature in a 20-foot radius sphere around the kobold must make a DC 13 saving throw, taking 86 fire damage. So it's basically a low dex save fireball that detonates, and essentially the kobold can do it if they want to, but if they're killed, it just happens automatically. There's the dead man switch part of it. And I think that that's just a really funny concept of these kobolds with kegs running around blowing themselves up and possibly taking out a party while they're at it. So here we have some encounter concepts, and there was one that I wanted. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Where is it? I wanted to look at here. Just the weight in the water. This one was a little bit different. So rather than a fully fleshed out encounter, this idea is more of an environment for you to use. Simply put, you set an encounter in an area with waist-high water, like a swamp or flooded building. In addition, make environment movement difficult, so difficult terrain. There could be hidden dangers such as enemies lurking under the murky surface, traps and things. Enemies might sneak up along the sunken ground, pop up, grapple a player, and then hold them underwater to drown them. Spells like water walking and water breathing and freedom of movement get a real chance to shine in this scenario. And that's actually kind of what drew me to this particular one, because I feel like those are three very powerful, very useful spells that don't come up too often in a regular campaign, and it's always nice to see those options get use. All right. Next up, I think, is magic items. So there's a lot of pop culture based items like the power pole. This is very clearly, I mean, it's right next to sensu beans, so there's some Dragon Ball stuff here. Some of these I thought was weird, like the dark vision goggles. It's basically goggles of night, except you also get some ability to see through magical darkness. Elixir of love. I feel like a filter of love is already a thing that exists. I'm not sure about that. Plummeting pouch, mystic top hat. This is the one, right? I mean, like I said, it's clearly pop culture driven, but they basically made the hook shot. I also thought interesting that the hook shot is an uncommon magic item, but basically it can shoot out a chain and pull you to it, as the hook shot should. The wielder can spend their action to make a ranged weapon attack as an object or creature within 50 feet. On a hit, it either lodges into the target or deals d6 piercing damage. As a bonus action, the wielder can command the hook to return instantly. If it's lodged into an object, they can be carried. Otherwise, the hook returns the object to them. Otherwise, it pulls the wielder to the hook, instantly moving them to the location of the hook. This movement provokes attacks of opportunity. The hook shot's a cool item, and I'm not entirely sure I love this design of it completely, but it does remind me that it's something that I would like to add into one of my campaigns, because I think that could be really fun. And now we're going to get more into the DM tips and the player tips. And these, I think, are probably, in my mind, the real bread and butter of this document. And take this with a grain of salt, right? This is one person or one group of people's opinion on this. But I do think they hit on a lot of really key points. And they're not, it's not nothing you haven't heard before, right? These are commonplace things. You've probably heard them, you've done them, but it's always interesting to see when they're written down as something to sort of just give you that both visual reminder to look at, and then also like, oh, hey, that's a thing. Let me add that into my campaign. Maybe you forgot. So I'm not going to really talk too much about some of these original ones. Let's see here. So this one, populate your rooms, and this was a concept that in early Wishes of the Coast adventures they could really use. Empty rooms are pointless in a dungeon, and maybe one in a whole dungeon is just an empty room. But when there are some D&D like pre-written 5th edition modules that are published by Wizards, where you go into a dungeon and there's like 7 or 8 just empty rooms with nothing in them that serves zero purpose. And, like, why even bother putting them in there at that point? It's just something, like, I get you're trying to make the place seem bigger, but, like, at least throw something in there, or some sort of, they talk about here about, maybe you use it for foreshadowing. It's just empty rooms are pointless. Maybe one is possible in the grand scheme of a dungeon, but too many empty rooms make the world feel like, one, it's not well thought out, and it sometimes also makes you look lazy as a dungeon master. Cutscene shit happens. Extra encounter. This one, use traps. I agree. Sometimes I feel like a lot of newer DMs or ones who aren't running pre-written things don't use traps. And in more often than not, a lot of people are always like it says right here. I check this room for traps. I check this room for traps. I check this room for traps. Why did I even play a rogue? Again, not that that's specific to rogues in this edition, but let people have traps for people to find so that they feel like when they're actually searching for traps, there's a reason. Because if there's no traps, I mean, that's two sides of the same coin, I guess. If there's never any traps, no one's going to check for them. So when you do spring a trap, they're going to feel caught off guard. But you know, when they check for traps, if they find one, there's a little vindication there. Little section on festivals about interrupting your players. Okay, so player tips. Again, I wouldn't think it would be a bad thing to print if you have this from 72 to 88. And like, hey guys, this doesn't mean anything specific, and none of this is specifically targeted at any of you. But I would really appreciate if everybody just read through this so we can make sure we're all on the same page. And, you know, it's like, do stuff in the game. Come prepared. Have your character sheet. Be ready to go. This is a little section here. Describe your character's actions. Yes and no. Like, so here it's listed like I move here, I attack. Magic missile, 8 damage. Some people play games like that, and that's fine. You know, if you play D&D, and that's how I started when I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I feel like there is a big focus on very descriptive combat based on a lot of really popular shows that are out there, and that's fine. But sometimes that bogs down combat. Combat takes even longer than it normally does if the dungeon master has to describe, or you have to sit there and describe every single blow you ever do. So it's a double-edged sword describing your character actions. It's immersive if you do. It's quicker if you don't. Take the hooks the DM gives you. Diversify your characters. Build group connections. Share the GM's workload. This is kind of a no-brainer, I thought. But like, if your DM's having a really rough time, maybe offer to do things like keep track of initiative. Or maybe you just run a one-shot to give them a break if their life is kind of going crazy at the moment. Know your actions. This is a big one. Guys, know what you're going to do before your turn and know what you can do as your actions, just because, like, no, and I see this all the time, and I play in games where this happens all the time. It'll go like, say you got like 3 players at the table, 4 players at the table. Sometimes it'll get through like 1, 2, 3. Those 3 characters and your enemies will go boom, 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 be done. And then it gets to one character and they're like, you know, I think I'm gonna do, hang on, let me check over here what's under this. You know, I don't, how many spell slots do I have left? Do I have a magic item? Can I do this thing? And it's just like, oh my god, just pick something to do, because we're trying to play a game and people want, like, especially if you do what I do where you stream a lot of your games, dead air time is boring and people don't want to see someone sit there and click through their character sheet for 10-15 minutes to choose a spell that ends up sometimes just being a cantrip anyway. Know what you're going to do, know what your action options are, and be ready to do that when it gets to your turn. Your loot, ready your actions, keep your drum away from the table. This one I thought was really interesting. Take pictures, right? You're playing a game. Obviously, if it's online, like some of my games are, it's less picturey, but like, I mean, it still can be. You can take screenshots and things, but it's just interesting for like this concept, like have your players document what's going on. Oh man, this is really cool. Or like, hey guys, let's get a selfie for the game for tonight. And the more stuff you do that, it's just like, it's documentation and ways to remember. You know, you upload that to your social media. Oh man, a year ago we did this in this dungeon. That was really a fun time. Just to build the memories of your experience. Especially, it goes, I feel like, a long way to the DM. Because, like, hey, look, the players actually want to remember this. They're taking documentation and taking pictures and making posts about it. Set traps as a player. Read the damn rules. Yes, thank you, God. It's the same thing we kind of talked about before. Know what your characters do. Know what your weapon damage is. Know how your attack bonus is calculated. These guys, just read the rules, like the base rules that specifically apply to your character. Know your character's features and traits and skills, spells, know how they work. No one wants you to be like, I'm going to cast this spell, and then you're like, the DM's like, really? And the party's like, really? And the player's like, yeah, of course. And then they find out later that it actually does damage to the entire party. That'd be like, say, I'm going to cast Fireball right here. You don't know what it is because you didn't read about it, and it damages and kills your whole party. And that's a very hyperbolic statement. I 100% agree. But I have seen that happen where a player picks a spell based on what they think the spell does, based on how cool the spell's name is, and they cast it, and then lo and behold find out that it does damage, or it does more damage than they thought, or it damages multiple, people around you. Just things to think about. Give the game your full attention. Yes, please. we as dungeon masters don't like to look up when we're taking notes or writing stuff down behind the screen, and we turn and we look up and everybody is checked out, right? I would say as someone who plays a lot of games online, this happens even more often because everybody's at their computer, so they're already connected to the internet with browsers open doing things. So that is even more of an instance for people to click, open other windows, not pay attention to the game. No one likes to repeat themselves as a dungeon master. You know, I mean, I've said this at my own game recently. Hey, if you were paying attention, I wouldn't have to repeat myself because players, I say one thing to 2 or 3 players at the table, and 1 or 2 players at the table just were completely checked out, not paying attention on their phone, doodling, taking, erroneous notes, passing notes between other players at the table. That's like, I get that, passing notes back and forth or whispering, having your conversation so it's not audible and distracting the DM or the other players who are trying to experience the story. But also don't let that become your sole focus so you lose sight of the story. Because, us dungeon masters take the time to build these things to provide entertainment for our players. And if you guys aren't really feeling it or really, aren't excited and enthralled or interested in the game or at least giving it your full attention, we kind of feel like, what's the point? Why are we gonna focus on your character and give your character cool stuff if you're never paying attention to the game? So again, it's simple, basic, common courtesy, but I feel like they put it in here for a reason because I'm sure they're experiencing it too. That's pretty much it, guys. I mean, here's the stuff from some of the people involved here in the Crit Academy D&D Character Lab, Interparty Conflict, JVC Parry. These are folks that I have interacted with in the past, but that is my review of Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 1. It was a little bit different, right? I've done a lot of reviews lately of, like, here's a collection of NPCs, here's a new character class, here's an adventure module. This one's a little bit different. You don't see a ton of these. I'm not saying that they don't exist out there, but this is basically just an interesting resource. And like I said, I think, I'm going to read the entire DM section as I say this all the time. I'm a DM. I'm always learning. There's always something new to learn, someone new to watch, some new idea, new concept, thing to incorporate into your game. I'm not closed-minded enough to think that I know everything about Dungeons and Dragons and I'm never going to learn anything else. So I will read that myself to keep myself up to date. And let me know what you guys think. Have you read this document? Do you use it yourself? What do you think about, just from what I read, what do you think about printing out the player section? And just, like, again, not calling anybody out specifically, but like, hey guys, let me hand you all this. I mean, you obviously as a DM read it yourself, take from it what you will, but print that out and hand it to your players and be like, hey guys, again, this isn't about anything specific, but I read this really cool document I found on the DMs Guild, and it has a whole section about tips for players. And I think that if everybody reads this, it'll really just enhance our game overall. Some players may take offense to that and think it's targeted at them, and you really can't do anything about that. You just have to know your players. But I am curious, do you think that that's a good idea? I do. I mean, again, some of those things are pretty basic. Know the rules. Or let even know the rules. Know what your character can do and plan out what you're going to do beforehand. Simple stuff, right? Pay attention to the game. That kind of a thing. But yeah, anyway, guys, if you don't know, here, I'm Ted. This is Nerd Immersion. I said that at the start, but we do stream every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and every other Sunday on our Twitch channel. There's a link in the description if you'd like to check it out. If you like what you see over there, be sure to follow us on Twitch. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel here and you're new, there's a subscription button down below. Go ahead and click that. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you at the next DM's Guild review.